In the spring of 2020, the physical world shut its doors. Highways emptied out, cities went quiet, and humanity retreated indoors, relying entirely on glowing screens for a lifeline to the outside. For Seattle detective Elias Thorne, the lockdown orders felt like a sentence. He was an older, immunocompromised cop who built his career by walking crime scenes and holding physical evidence. Now he was stuck in a remote cabin with nothing but a VPN and a stack of digitized files. His daily routine involved scanning the 2008 files of the Hood River Ghoul, a serial predator who abducted 5 women and left 0 digital footprint. Thorne was analyzing old encrypted hard drives seized from a dead suspect, looking for any missed patterns. But as he sifted through the dead man's data, an encrypted backdoor in the code flared to life. It began pinging an active, heavily layered routing protocol hidden deep on a decentralized network. While legitimate society had pressed pause, illicit networks had adapted. The absolute isolation of the pandemic had created a perfect, unmonitored vacuum for predators to expand their operations deep in the dark web. Thorne bypassed the initial firewalls, expecting to find an archived database. Instead, the user interface loaded into a minimalist, active chat room. The main window displayed a low-lit video feed of a concrete room. In the center, a woman was bound to a heavy steel chair, terrified and struggling, while anonymous users placed bids for her in Bitcoin. A new figure stepped into the frame, and Thorne realized what he was looking at. The man wore a jagged, crude burlap mask. The Hood River Ghoul was alive, and he was broadcasting his crimes in high definition. Thorne immediately tried to ping the feed's origin, but the network architecture was built to repel exactly this kind of trace. Every time he locked on to an IP address, the signal fragmented, bouncing through proxy servers in Russia, China, and Brazil. The nearest precinct was 2 hours away, operating on a skeleton crew bogged down by health protocols. Against a network designed to be mathematically untraceable, a standard cyber forensics response would take days. Thorne was entirely outmatched, and the victim was out of time. Knowing the firewall was impenetrable, Thorne stopped fighting the code. He fell back on what he knew best, analyzing the physical reality of the room captured on the camera. He scrutinized the concrete wall behind the victim. Tucked high in the corner, almost completely covered by dark paint and soundproofing foam, was a tiny rectangular sliver of exposed glass. Through that narrow opening, a distinct reflection swept across the paint. It was an oscillating pattern of green and white light, flashing in a very steady, rhythmic sequence. Thorne recognized that specific pulse from a burglary case he worked at a riverside mill 5 years earlier. It's the signature of a Type S railway signal, a localized warning system used exclusively at the rail junctions along the Columbia River Gorge. Thorne cross-referenced the signal with the area's layout. This specific light sequence is only visible from one location, the basement of the abandoned Columbia River paper mill. The site had the soundproof units and heavy power needed for a sustained broadcast. Criminals can encrypt their software and bounce their IP addresses across the globe, but hosting a live video stream requires heavy-duty electrical power, massive physical computer servers, and complete total isolation. The digital fortress had a very real address. Thorne broke every lockdown protocol he had. He grabbed his old service weapon, he threw himself into his truck, and pushed the vehicle to 100 miles an hour down the slick, fog-choked canyon roads. He kept the live stream running on his dashboard phone. The chat lit up with brutal demands as the bidding spiked to 25 Bitcoin, and the masked figure stepped into the center of the frame, drawing a heavy, serrated knife. Arriving at the site, Thorne cut his headlights a quarter-mile out. He moved quietly through the deafening rain, breaching the rusted perimeter fence and navigating toward a cluster of thick black power cables snaking down into the processing building's basement. The encrypted void of the internet was gone. Thorne was now 30 feet away from the hardware running the show, dragging a phantom of the deep web into a physical confrontation in the real world. Reaching the heavy steel door of the chemical storage room, Thorne leveled his weapon and fired directly into the locking mechanism. The metal shattered, and he kicked the door open. The room smelled of ozone and human fear. The ghoul charged instantly. The resulting collision was brutal, matching a breathless 55-year-old man against an adrenaline-fueled predator 20 years his junior. The masked man slammed Thorne against the ground, the hunting knife slashing through his jacket. Thorne's gun skidded out of reach across the concrete floor. Pinning him down, the younger man was rapidly winning the physical fight. Realizing he couldn't overpower his attacker, Thorne used his last burst of momentum to break the grapple. He didn't die for his gun. He threw himself at the heavy industrial power strip feeding the entire operation. With a violent yank, he disconnected the main line. The humming server fans shut down immediately. The harsh blue monitors died, and the room went black. In the sudden silence, the ghoul froze. Without electricity, his audience was gone. The encryption, the Bitcoin, the digital authority, it all vanished in an instant, leaving a panicked, powerless man stumbling blind in a cold basement. Digital networks, regardless of their encryption or sophistication, depend entirely on physical servers and local power grids. The Internet, at its most vulnerable core, remains a system with a physical plug.